Netflix. This one I find to be absolutely fascinating. Netflix takes on Texas. Attorneys analyze the outlandish fight over cuties. The Hollywood Reporter is basically, they're talking about a story in which this month there was supposed to be a hearing in Texas. Netflix is facing was to face a criminal charge for, I think it was like child lewd behavior or something. There was a federal ruling that overturned the statute from Texas about children in lewd activities or lewd behavior. So the DA, who, strangely enough, as the story goes, played the character Spider in the film School of Rock. His name is Lucas Babin. Brought the film Cuties to a grand jury and asked them if it depicted children in adult films, to put it mildly. And a grand jury returned 4 felony indictments. So now what's happening is we're seeing with this Hollywood Reporter story, they're bringing in these lawyers who are like, oh, it's a First Amendment thing. You know, they're obviously critiquing the sexualization of children. And we're now in this strange world where when a DA brings the film before a bunch of regular people and says, was a crime committed? They say yes. Yet the establishment media, the left, as you would call it, is defending a film in which they took 4 young girls. I don't care if you think they're actors or actresses or whatever, actually taught these little girls to do these dance moves, had them do it in an extended scene that was like 3 minutes long, have scenes where there's clearly adults grooming these children, and then said, but it's a critique, it's fine. This is the you know, if I can broaden the conversation a little bit outside of this, clearly we live in completely different realities with whatever the establishment and the left is, from regular people to...
I'm kind of thinking of George Carlin's obscenity, push against obscenity. I understand. I'm, you know, morally, I felt like that movie was a little too sexualized. I think you made the example earlier. It's like, in order to explain something, you don't have to like show it necessarily. Like something really vile, you don't want to like put it in front of people to prove that you're doing it.
You know, when Shakespeare wrote plays, all the violence happened off stage. You don't need to see it to know what happened.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, those little girls actually doing those scenes in front of a whole, I would imagine, mostly adult male crew, is just gross. I mean, what were the parents or anyone thinking?
Well, so I think there's one part of this story that easily proves they know they're doing something wrong. In the Hollywood Reporter, they say, conservative circles have rallied behind criticism of the movie for sexualizing and exploiting children. Babin's father, Texas Congressman Brian Babin, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, and a group of more than 30 House Republicans have called on the DOJ to prosecute Netflix. This and other calls by conservatives to investigate the making of the movie prompted Netflix to apologize for inappropriately sexualizing actresses in marketing materials. The marketing materials were clips from the movie.
Yeah, they were pretty nasty. The issue is that it's not a critique because they actually did it. They actually did these things with little girls. As Kelly J was saying, you know, in front of an audience of crew. They paid them for it. You know, they paid the children to do these things. There was a lot of incentive to do a good job, and please the people who were asking them to do it.
I brought up Carlin because he, in order to show the obscene thing that he wanted to make more publicly agreeable, he would just do it. He would say it. He would say the words that were horrendous at the time. And this is kind of like, so the metaphor is like the child sexuality is the dirty words of the 70s.
No,
it would be different if it was an animation. It would be different
like
if
Big
it
Mouth.
Was... Yeah,
which is also disgusting and weird.
It would be different if it was adults playing children, right?
There's a line
that
you
would be
can't
different.
cross.
Or they could just like, the kids could have come out on the stage and then it could have showed the people's faces then not actually put these little girls in that situation.
Carlin got arrested for saying the words, but he did it anyway. He was like, I'm just going to...
Yeah, but he was saying words. He wasn't
and he's an adult.
Depicting the abuse of children, which is different.
Right.
And even if you say things, like if he had said out loud what was being done, you know, what these girls were doing and being made to do, if you say it out loud, that's also different than actually doing it. So it's what makes it, I think, more similar to like a pornographic situation is that just like in adult films, the acts are actually performed.
What would be crazy is if it was about child murder and the movie was all about showing kids getting killed, there wouldn't be any emotional backlash like there is about child sex. It's
would
a
they
big different.
would the children actually be killed?
No, it would be all be
film?
acting, just like this is all acting.
No.
But it's not acting once
right.
you're doing the actual thing.
Right. So like,
I mean, even if you're acting like you're doing the thing, you're actually still doing the thing.
It's their real
you know,
bodies.
it's and it's like if that was a snuff film, if you're talking about a snuff film, there would be a lot of backlash of that.
well, I mean,
And this
I
One
wouldn't call
would
it
hope.
backlash. I would say like pitchforks and
And it would
arrests
be,
and
you know,
DOJ
it would be
investigations.
illegal. It would
Yes.
definitely
Right.
be
I
illegal
guess
to do like
I didn't
I
see.
think this-
Did you guys see Cuties? I haven't seen it.
You know-
I wouldn't watch it. I didn't watch it.
I
Seen some of the bits. But
yeah.
I saw a couple
So
clips.
so the issue for me was I watched enough of it to where I said I'm not interested in watching this film, and yeah, I'll put it that way. I did not watch the film as if to say like I sat through the whole thing, but I watched the relevant bits to a certain degree and was just like, this needs to be turned off. It's disturbing.
Dude, they got a kid that looks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That the main 12-year-old actor looks like a sexualized Cortez. It's
Well,
insane. Talk about clown
Sure, but
world.
that's like a French film.
Yeah,
or
what a weird
whatever, so I'm
coincidence.
not sure.
Yeah, so
It
Cuties is
probably
the
is.
reason that I canceled my Netflix subscription. I was like, this is unacceptable. Sorry, I'm just not having it. I don't feel like giving money to a company that thinks that this is tolerable. It's not.
Here's
I was more angry when they pulled Star Trek, the original series.
that's
off.
Imagine it this way, Ian. Imagine they made let's make a film critiquing children doing drugs, and we'll literally give kids crack and film it, and then be like
Like a reality
"Oh, we're
show."
critiquing it.
Yeah.
That's the issue. So
It's more like that, I think,
It would be
than
more-
what Carlin was
But
doing.
was it a reality? I didn't see the movie. Was it a reality show? It wasn't. It was fake.
No, it was
all,
fake. But I mean, look
wait,
at
what do you mean?
Like the movie wasn't. They didn't actually go into a club and get 12-year-olds dancing. They
No,
They had to
hired
audition,
actors.
and they probably had to sign a contract, and their parents had to agree to this grooming
But it was
behavior.
sexual. It was so they had to, whatever they were doing, acting or not, it was a sexualized performance. So it doesn't really matter whether they were acting; they were still actually doing it with their real bodies.
So the funny thing is, the response from a lot of these people on the left is that the final scene in question, where the little like 11-year-old girls or whatever are doing the sex dancing, is that the audience is disgusted by it, and I'm like, but you all literally watched it too, and they actually had these little girls do that. So what? Show someone being grossed out by it, and all of a sudden you're allowed to do it? That doesn't make sense to me. If you're criticizing it, you wouldn't do it, right?
Also, when we have like TV shows or stuff like that in the U.S., usually adults do it. Like 90210, which is the first thing I could think of. All those actors were in their 20s.
Right.
And they were like having sex and doing whatever. They weren't actually having sex, but they had like all the make-out scenes and stuff. But everyone was in their 20s. The same with like, you know, Riverdale or any of those
Euphoria.
shows.
What a-
They're
what a-
all in their 20s.
What about Superbad? I brought this up when I was talking about this earlier today. Christopher Mintz-Plasse, I think, was like 16 when they filmed the movie, and there's a scene where he's having sex with some woman or whatever, and apparently his parents had to be there and sign off on it. I'm wondering, this is a 16-year-old. We know high school kids are doing things, but does that make it better at all? Because I'm actually wondering.
I'm wondering, yeah. As
I-
you're saying that, I'm wondering about that as well.
I mean,
I still thought it was messed up.
realistically,
Yeah.
a 16-year-old boy and an 11-year-old girl are worlds of different when it comes
Yeah,
to
yeah.
sexuality.
That's true
Well,
too.
right.
One
It's-
is going, has gone through puberty and is still doing it, and the other
Still
one
feels
is
exploitative though.
yeah.
Yeah.
Filming a 16-year-old boy.
That's certainly not.
Pretending to
I would
have
never
sex.
sign off on that for my kid.
If I had been
he
that
was
16-year-old boy,
16.
I would have launched at that opportunity.
Well,
though.
so,
sure.
So here's the
Would your
interesting
parents
thing.
have gone for it?
yeah, they supported whatever my
Yeah.
choices.
My
they
parents
trusted.
did not do that.
I honestly feel like this, along with what the whole Florida controversy over "Don't Say Gay," it really does feel like
It's not in the bill.
right. It's not, but their perception of it or what their critique is. You look at Superbad. There's a scene where a 16-year-old kid is hooking up. That's in the movie, and it's not like graphic or anything, but it's clearly a scene acted out by this kid. And they want you to be like, they're 16-year-olds. We know high school kids are doing stuff. Then you end up with shows like Big Mouth, which is like 12. What was the show, like 12 and 13-year-olds?
Yeah.
That show's messed up. It's a
11,
cartoon,
13,
though. It's a
yeah.
cartoon. Everyone's like, oh, but it's Nick Kroll. It's like famous actors pretending to be kids, and it's just cartoons. And I'm like,
Still
it's
weird.
still weird. Do you guys know the show Big Mouth?
I don't know it.
You've got to
No.
watch.
Really? Should I write
It's
this
worth.
down?
Yeah. It's the most overly sexualized cartoon I've ever seen.
Of children.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not.
Oh God! And you're saying I have to watch it.
It's like
gruesome.
you might get sick to your stomach. And then he's got like a little sex demon on his shoulder that tells him to
No,
have
it's not
sex.
little. It's a massive.
It's just crazy.
It's like 6 feet tall.
Yeah, I won't watch it. I
I
tried.
think
So-
sex demons would be large.
Yeah.
They'd
Well,
be like, I'm
larger than life.
overbearing.
Yeah.
They're-
I'm taking over.
They Netflix got criticized. Critiqued is probably the wrong word for it, because there's an episode where it shows 2 little girls walking around naked, and it shows a whole bunch of naked women, and they said, no, we're trying to tell little girls to be okay with their bodies. That's why we're showing it. And people said, look, dude, it's a cartoon. There were no actual children here. Then what happens? You end up with movies like Cuties, where it's like, now you have actual little girls doing it, but
Right.
oh, come on, it's a critique, just like, and I'm just like, yo, why don't you guys like stop?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too because this stuff is coming up in books too that are now available in schools. There's this whole controversy with this book, Gender Queer, by a person called Maya Koabe, I think. I don't know how to say her name exactly right, but this book has been talked about by parents all over the U.S. That this book has child pornography in it, and that it has like depictions of all these crazy things. So I bought the book because I had been writing about it, and I was like, I should really take a look at this book myself. And it is rather disturbing, not just for the reasons that the moms that I know were complaining about it, but also for this journey of this young girl who comes to decide that she's not a girl at all, that she has like these other pronouns that are like, they start with E's.
EM ear.
Yeah, that's it, EM ear. And so the book eventually is the story of this person who grows up to be a comic book artist who's 25, has never had sex, has no interest in sex, is binding their breasts, and is teaching middle school and planning to come out to the middle schoolers as an asexual AEM heir. And this is all like very affirmed, and it's all very, couched in this language of hyper positivity. The main character in this book hates their body, is terrified of going to the gynecologist, which if you're a woman, like you got to show up at the gynecologist at a certain point, at least a bunch of times in your life, to make sure that you're not dying from a
Right.
whole bunch of reproductive issues that can kill you. So, this person is terrified of that, terrified of being touched, all of this stuff. And it's in the language of joy and spectacularness.
Look, I can, understand adults who want to live however they want to live. Someone's over 18 and they decide they want to, juggle oranges all day or like dress up like a giant duck. I'm going to be like, literally, don't care what you do, man. You can go mind your own business. But it's the obsession with children that I find, disconcerting.
Me too. Yeah, like why do you need your middle school teacher to come out to you and tell you that they hate their body and
It's all over TikTok, right? That
all of this
people
stuff.
actually do come out to really small children in this fashion. But there is an overwhelming surge to break the frontier and boundaries of kids, just totally erode all safeguarding, not allow them to use words that are literal and mean something. And the sexualization of kids, whether it's Cuties, whether it's this cartoon, but it's like, it's as if you're doing something remarkable if you're trying to enforce this onto kids. It's so messed up.
It's almost like we've destroyed our culture to the point where there's no way for children to gauge when they're adults. So we just have to decide that they're adults from the very beginning and can understand this stuff. So kids are learning about gender identity before they know what sex is.
Why? I don't think it needs to be asked, but to the left, my question is to the left in general, why they think there's an age of consent. Now the issue is, I honestly think the left is opposed to that idea of an age of consent. I think many of these people are just ignoring that issue for now. But I think if you were to actually get these people in private and ask them, they'd probably advocate for really, really messed up stuff.
I think that's correct. And I think we've seen that, right?
I think what they're doing is they're eroding our culture with, things like Cuties and defending it. And I'm like, could you imagine this film being made 15, 20 years ago.
Well, 15, 20 years ago, or 20 years ago anyway, like Tipper Gore would be pissed, right? And she was the second lady or whatever, the vice president's wife, who put the explicit advisory lyrics on, My Jane's Addiction album. Prostasia, the Prostasia Foundation, which is all about.
Well, gets convicted, but convicted of what? What did she do? I mean, we're talking about a crime that involves two people, right? Where are her clients? Why they all get away with it? And then it's really funny how it's just like anybody who brings that stuff up is clearly a conspiracy theorist, and they must be making things up. And I'm just like, dude, the Netflix thing is really, really fascinating because I don't think they're going to be able to walk away from this one. A grand jury. So apparently the feds are like, we're gonna have a hearing on this in June or something, or July, over whether or not this stands. But I have a feeling that the DA is going to say to the federal judge, we completely agree with their critique. Yeah, and agree. You shouldn't sexualize kids. Okay, but they did.
It's such a shame, though, don't you think, with Netflix, because they really stood up for Dave Chappelle. They are willing to sort of allow supposedly controversial opinions, and I really was, I totally back them for that. I think that's brilliant. And then they do this, and you're like, oh, come on, please.
I don't know if they actually back Dave Chappelle to a certain extent. The last special that Dave did was heavily focused on trans people. It's like it's really weird.
Yeah.
Dave did a special. He mentioned he had jokes about trans people. He got attacked heavily for it, and it seemed like it consumed him. And so he ends up,
right?
His next special ends up being this kind of like, it was very defensive.
Yeah. It was nearly a TED talk, to be fair.
Yeah, no, seriously. Yeah. Where he was like, and he was like, I guess people just don't understand the joke, so I'm going to stop doing them. Well, it's like they got him.
What did you think of that? What did you think of the whole Chappelle thing?
Well, I have issues anyway, because I think he's incredible for walking away from all that money and keeping his dignity and credibility all those years ago. But I'm not really a great big fan of his humour. The way that he talked about Candace Owens, I just can't really get past that. But yeah, I think it's bizarre that comedians, Ricky Gervais is the same, they sort of tell a joke and then explain the joke. And like, when have you started doing that?
Right.
Just tell a joke. If it's funny, we'll laugh. And if it's not, we'll move on. But you saying, oh, this is a joke because actually I'm doing a bit of wordplay and I'm doing this and please don't cancel me. It's like, no, just have the bravery.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.